Good evening, gamers. Tonight we're talking hex crawls with Robert Conley from Bad in the Attic Games. Robert is currently running a Kickstarter project that dates back to September 18th, 2009, when the first of 24 blog posts went up on the Bat in the Attic blog page detailing how to build a fantasy hex crawl. And these blog posts have now been laid out in great detail, and I believe it's a 150 plus page book, How to Make a Fantasy Sandbox. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Robert. I'm excited to talk about this project.
I'm glad to be here and share my thoughts and listen to your comments.
Awesome. All right. So people are actually, instead of just How to Make a Fantasy Sandbox, folks are getting 3 books with
Yes,
this Kickstarter when they back it. Can you explain what the 3 books are that folks will be getting?
yes. The first one would be How to Make a Fantasy Sandbox. Will be about 150 page, kind of like this book, both hardcover and soft cover. And technically, you'll get uh, at cost print code for both the hardcover and soft cover version. So if you want to cash them both out, that that's up to you. But I find that's easier to do that rather than making people choose. Well, I'm going to pick the hardcover or the soft cover. Now I'll just give you both. And the second one, I use an example setting in How to Make a Sandbox called the Island of Fade, and a lot of people over the years have told me they like that setting, but they wish they had it consolidated, much the same way as Black Marsh. And so that's the second book. It's going to be a digest sets book, uh, different color cover, but similar in size to the Black Marsh, probably about as thick. And then the last book is uh, an at cost copy of Black Marsh. Now I know Black Marsh isn't very expensive, but I was able to, with the leftover funds from past Kickstarters, I was able to commission a new cover art for it. So this is what the cover art. It's by Richard Luschek. He does the art for the Harn for Columbia Games,
Right.
and he drew this nice picture of some adventurers sailing into the port of Castle Blackmarsh, and he is going to do the cover illustration for How to Make a Fantasy Sandbox. Although, unfortunately, I won't have a preview of that until November.
I can't wait to see it, because that cover for Black Marsh is gorgeous. So
Oh, thank you, and I'll let him know that. A lot of people really, really like it.
yeah, it's really cool with the banners around the edge and then the artwork right front and center.
Well, he did the centerpiece. I did the layout of
Oh,
the yeah, this layout is a uh Greyhawk folio homage.
oh,
And
that's so,
I had
yes.
I know I do maps, so I have plenty of clip art to do coats of arms. So I made a bunch of coats of arms, except for this one here. Back in the day when I did live action role playing, this was the coat of arms of the knight, Sir Endless Star, that I played. So of course I'm going to give this center place of honor on my covers.
As you should. So, when it comes to map making, I was kind of wondering what your preferred medium is. Are you more of a digital guy, or do you prefer pen and paper to start?
Well, I have a bit of a hybrid approach. Um, so what I'll do is like my follow-up project to How to Make a Fantasy Sandbox is going to be Into the Majestic Fantasy Realm, which is going to be an expanded version of Black Marsh and several other map settings that I've released in the past that adjoin Black Marsh, and I'm going to combine them, fill them out. And however, there was one area where I'd never mapped it before. So I took an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and taped on the southern edge of the one map that I was going to draw off of. And then I drew it by pencil and I scanned it in, and then I traced over it using CorelDRAW, which is the program I mainly use. It's a vector illustration program.
Yep.
Uh, Other programs are like similar to that are Adobe Illustrator and Inkscape, which is free, and will do everything that I do for mapping, uh, but it's for free. The only reason I don't use it on a regular basis is because I've been using CorelDRAW for ages, but I've used Inkscape enough to know that it's a solid it would do the job. And then there will be times when I will, use a tablet. Especially, I will scan something in and then I will just, trace over coastlines and
Gotcha.
rivers and stuff like that because it's just easier to do it when it with a with like a pencil-like object. And then for everything else, I just use the mouse and symbols and stuff like that.
That's pretty cool. I didn't know if you would have just one way that you did it, or I like the hybrid approach because at this stage, I would need to get a tablet, but I am primarily a pencil and paper guy with just about everything I do. And then I'll type in whatever I wrote or something.
Well, I recommend getting a scanner, and that way you can scan in your map, put that down on the bottommost layer of your drawing.
Yep.
Yeah, whatever. If you Now, a lot of people are intimidated by Illustrator, Inkscape, CorelDRAW, and they just want to use a simple paint program, and that's fine. Just make sure you get one with layers. That way, you can take your original sketch, scan it in, make it the bottom layer, and then do your final drawing on top of it, uh, on the layer up, and then you can just either delete the bottom layer or hide it when you
Right.
make time for your final drawing. And for this stuff, for the mapping stuff, layers are your friend.
Oh, I'm sure. I couldn't imagine trying to draw everything on one layer, how bad that could go if you realize you made a mistake in one place and it involves erasing way too much.
A lot of tears, a lot
Yeah.
of teething parts of your entities. I
Yes.
quickly learned how to do layers. Yeah, if people, I made a fan version of the Darlene map for Greyhawk, and it's an exact copy of what she did, but it's digital, so you can make it infinitely small. Or if you want to spend $100 and make an entire banner out of it, you can. Okay, there's no resolution issue. That's the main reason I did the map. But if you open it up in Adobe Reader, you'll see it has a ton of layers.
All right. We have Joe the lawyer in, and
He wants me to sell the good stuff.
yeah.
Well, the good stuff, folks, is so you want to roll your own setting, but it's an entire planet, and you're not sure where to start. And
Above all
Joe
else, sell
Joe
the
is
fine
the
editing.
Joe did the editing for me, as well as the critiquing, the bulk of the critiquing. And he did a really good job too. It really helped a lot.
Yeah, with what you had shown me, everything looked fantastic. I wish I was able to do screen share for you.
Yeah,
So
I know.
next time, next
I'm
time.
almost done with the layout. I'm doing the final chapter, which is in a part of the appendix called traveling. I came up with I played Adventures in Middle Earth, and I really liked it. It really captures the feel of Middle Earth. The One Ring's good, but it's kind of like its own system, and it's more narrative oriented, which is fine. But I like some. But Adventures in Middle Earth is based on D&D 5e, which is more in my wheelhouse, and it has an excellent set of travel rules. And I studied it, and I didn't copy it, but I understanding how it works. I came up with a version of it for my own use. And the nice thing about it is that when you use the traditional travel rules, you always have like okay, if you roll a 1 in 6 chance of encountering something every 10 minutes in the dungeon, or you're going through the wilderness and it's like 1 in 12 chance. Well, you're just making roll after roll after roll, but you kind of know when you make repeated rolls, it's a bell curve. So why not just m- pick a set of dice like 2d6 or 2d4 and just roll the number of counters for the length of the journey, and then you just focus on rolling those encounters, and then you look at, and the nice thing about doing it that way is you can look at them and say, hey, this is a swamp encounter, and they're going to encounter a swamp here. Whereas if you're doing it the traditional way, you might roll a result that doesn't really make sense for where you're at in the city or in the wilderness. And this way, you can put each encounter uh, where it best fit, but you're still rolling, so it's not an arbitrary decision of
Right.
what the party encounters. You're just decide. The only thing arbitrary is where they're going to encounter it. And sometimes you can chain them together, and it can kind of become the middle mini adventures. I had that happen in Adventures in the Middle Earth campaign I ran, and I rolled 3 encounters, and the way they just came up, they were perfect to set them up as sort of like an ambush of one of the party's enemies, and it basically formed the entire session resolving that.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Hey, thanks, Jose. I hope I pronounced that right.
Yep, I just saw
Glad
that.
glad you glad you backed my Kickstarter.
Ugh.
Yeah, a lot of people say, Rob, when's the book coming out? When's the book coming out? So I have a lot of projects going on, and some of them come together quicker than most. And how to make a Fantasy Sandbox. So after I made that final post, start putting it together, and it just came together over the course of 2 months in June and July. And then
That
I handed it off to Joe for editing, and then
that is
uh,
awesome. I don't know how you compiled 15 years of work into 2 months. That had to be like breakneck speed to get that done.
well, I mean, I've already wrote it.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, the problem is, though, when you write it, they're blog posts. So I had to look at first of all, I had to look at all the pop culture references I use. Some of them I left in, but some of them I axed because nobody's going to remember what happened in 2012 in that level of detail. Um, but and also there's a different voice when you're writing a book. So but the thing is, I was editing and revising, which is a quicker process than coming up with from scratch. And the reason it took me so long is because I thought it would be a neat idea to use this setting. Is in this binder, like I've always used Judges Guild Waterland of High Fantasy as my main setting, but there was always this thing in the back of the mind. I wanted this original setting where it's only Rob's stuff. And so I did that, but truth be told, nobody wanted to play it. They always wanted to go back to the Waterland. Hey, Rob, we want to go to this section, and because they loved the fact that I would use what I did in previous campaign as a background for the current campaign, and so they loved stumbling on what other players did, what they did, and sometimes it's what they did, not just last year, but 2 or 3 or 5 years down the line for some of my oldest friends. And so I never got to really run this, but you know, I have maps,
Wow.
I have old computer printouts from a dot matrix printer, bunch of written notes. And you know what? For my how to make a sandbox post, I'm going to use this. But the problem is that quickly found is because I never ran it, I never really got into that level of detail. So I had to come up with not only had to come up with a scratch, I had to come up with a scratch which would make sense in terms of what I was talking about with the post, which was actually the hard part. So it took over 14 years to figure out the exact way I was going to say different elements, but I got it done. And once I got it done, it was able to come together quickly for the Kickstarter.
That's awesome. And thanks, Joe, for doing the editing. I can't wait to see the work that both of you have put into this. So, one thing I thought was really cool, you have the numbered list of the 34 things that you would do when making a fantasy sandbox. If you had to pick 5 items from those 34, and if you could, that were absolutely essential, which ones would it be?
The regional map, the main town map, important NPCs, the organization culture that they're part of, the context of the NPCs that they exist in.
Gotcha.
Like I have a thieves guild, so you're going to have maybe a handful of NPCs that are involved in the thieves guild, but to make sense of how to role play them, you got to understand what the thieves guild is about. Same with the nobles, the same with the undead folks that are the basically the antagonists, the enemies of the setting, and then a handful of locations for adventuring.
Nice. I'm surprised you did that quick. That was fast. You were like, yeah, these 5 things.
Well, I would be lying to say you weren't the first to ask that question. I had people who say, "Hey, if I don't," most people ask me, "How can I get away to not start at step one?" In which I can say, "Okay, start at step four, which is make a regional map." You start at step one because the whole idea of step one, and I can show it here. The whole idea of step one is to get something like this, just to keep yourself consistent. Don't really have to detail what here or here. Just scribble, there's a kingdom here, bad guys there, empire there. And then when you carve out that, then you pick a region to detail, then go hog wild and coming up with history and stuff like that. But that way, if you ever decide to go off the edge of the map, you give yourself a starting point. But some people are intimidated by that, and that's okay. You can just start with a letter size piece of paper and just draw yourself something like this, you know?
A great looking
And
map.
for those you don't know, what I did was I took a map of Holland, flipped it on his back, sketched it out. It was a
Mhm.
medieval map, so it didn't quite look like the modern coastline. And then I filled in this area here with land because in the real map of Holland, which is kind of like
Yeah,
that flipped around, but this over here would be coastline, but here I just filled in with land. And the reason I did that because somebody figured out that one of the original sketch map that Dave Aronson was working with was drawn on the back of a medieval map of Holland. Now we couldn't figure out which map he used. There's like dozens to pick from, but I figured why not make a homage map by picking an arbitrary map and just flipping it around and drawing on it. And that's another thing you guys can do if you're intimidated by drawing a map. Just pick uh, maps are fractal of the world. Maps are fractal. That means when you zoom in or out to a point, but zoom in or out, it kind of looks all the same. You can't really tell if it's a 100-mile long coastline, 10-mile long coastline, or a 1 mile long coastline. And so what you can do is you can pick a map that looks good, flip it around, mirror it, and then just trace it out and fill in, put a lake here that wasn't really there and or fill out some get rid of one coastline to fill it out with land. And then you have your own original map and nobody will realize where you take on. For example, the coast of North Carolina, if you rotate it upwards, makes an excellent and draw some mountains in those peninsulas that are jutting out into the Atlantic. You have an excellent home for Viking, a Scandinavian race culture.
Yeah, that
And
is. Sorry.
no, that's it.
That is just an ingenious idea. And I'm ashamed to say I've never, ever, ever thought of doing that. And yeah, I'm going to be hitting the local bookstore for a few atlases of ancient maps.
Right, and with today's paint program, it's really easy to flip and mirror and distort maps to get something, and then one thing you could do is print it out, get a thin piece of paper that you can see through, shine a lamp through it or another light source, and then just trace over it and just make your alterations there, then scan that back in. Scanners are cheap. Uh, and and then you have something you can draw on the computer. Or you can do it old school like I did. You draw it out in pencil, and then you ink it in, and then you photocopy it before you start filling out forest and other terrain like that.
Yep.
You photocopy it, and then you'd fill it out with the photocopy. That way, if you make a mistake, you can throw it away, take another photocopier, and resume work. Because one thing, and this is a good example of how I did it old school, is this is a photocopy, and I have about
Huh.
a dozen of these still remaining here. And so that way I can go in and with my colored pencils and ink sketch in stuff.
Nice. And I'm going to have to rewatch this interview a couple times so I pick out all the great tidbits that you're laying out here.
Sure.
So,
I hate to say this. What was the original question that led us on this little thread?
oh,
I
I
think
had
there was
asked you
something I
about
didn't answer.
no, you did answer everything because I had asked you
Okay.
the 5 things that were 100% necessary to do, and we answered
Okay.
that. And like I said earlier, I'm good going down rabbit holes. So, um, how do you feel like your map making has evolved as a result of doing the blog? And do you think it would have gone on a similar trajectory had you just kept all this knowledge to yourself?
The map making?
Yeah.
The map making would have followed it. Yes, I love map making. I Well, Joe, you're gonna have to scratch this one off your bingo card. But first of all, one item that's on the random party generated bingo card is like reach off camera for something. Okay, so it's gonna be a hang on. This is gonna be a tangent. Find it. I think is that it? Well, yeah, I got it. Well, this is what we started with. Printed by Judges Guild or printed by TSR. And so what happened, as you can see, well, that's a green screen effect down there. It's not a real hole, but
No.
there are holes in this map from overuse. So what I did was I took a light table, slapped my City State of the Invincible Overlord map on it. And plus there were changes to the city by then. And I drew this. This
Wow.
is this is the first map serious map I ever did. I was a
Wow.
sophomore in college. I just took, I had a geography minor to my computer science major, and I went, um, I took out my first geography course, which they had you, the geography lab, which is a room full of light tables, and they taught you how to use technical pencils and vellum to draw maps and how to like draw out roads, the topography line for roads and stuff like that, for planning purposes. And so after hours, we still had access, and I got my homework done quick, and and then I took my stuff, and then I went there, and also the other thing that enabled this project is I found out the university had a blueprint copier.
Oh,
In other words,
wow.
you can hand them uh, a poster-sized piece of paper, and they can make a photocopy of it for you.
Yeah.
That was like $1 a square foot, which is kind of pricey, but I only needed a few. So I drew the ink, and I have that stored in a box somewhere. But then on that photocopy, I drew this, colored it, inked it with my technical pen. And I took one of the other photocopiers. Now this one got goobered, but this is an example of what the original photocopies look like.
Wow.
And this has the key that I would use. But this I would just put in front of the players. They were allowed to see this. They
Yep.
weren't allowed to see this. But this way I had my key. And after I got done with that,
Those maps are amazing, Robert.
thank you. I did the Waterland maps myself.
Nice.
Now, by this time, I was a huge fan of Harn. First time I encountered it back in the mid 80s. So one of the things I did is I learned how to draw in the Harn style. And I know you guys can't see this on camera, but basically mountains are like areas with a boundary and scribbles, and hills are like a dot pattern. And the advantage of doing it this way is you're able to overlay terrain with vegetation. So, this forest here is in hills because I can look at it closely and see that the dot patterns for the hills run through that, which is something you can't do with more artistic maps or maps drawn like they did for the known world and be in the Mentor's box set. So I did these. I did a couple of these. Um, I didn't cover the complete waterland with these maps because I expanded the scale from 5 miles to 12.5 miles. So the players had more than enough room to venture in once I got 3 or 4 of these done. But then I got into computers. Oh,
You've got a lot of big
I put it in a
maps.
safe spot. No. There we go. So this is the very first computer map I did. And of course, I picked city state, and of course I have green screen action going on. Let me see what I can do here. Video settings, background effect. No. Oh well, we'll just live with it. So anyway, this is the first computer map I ever did.
Wow.
And then after so many years, this culminated in my first campaign maps,
Nice.
which again, apologize for the holes, but that's the problem with green forest and green screen. And last, which unfortunately because of the Judges Guild fiasco, I'm no longer able to sell, but something that people really appreciated, and I consider pretty much my magnus opus, is a color version of the original City State of the Invincible
Look
Overlord
at that.
mat.
Wow.
And not only I was able to do it, I was able to offer it the physical map in 4 sections. This is a single map here, but I have a technique where I make sure there's enough overlap so people can use packing tape, the tape them all together to make the original size map.
Oh, nice.
So so that is a digression on whether my mapping would have continued if I did not do my blog or I did not sell stuff. Oh yes, yes, I would have this this map, the one I showed you with the campaign map.
Yep.
This was I was bound and determined to get this done regardless of what happened as far as blogging or publishing goes. And I just got this done when the whole Judges Guild thing hit, and so I was never able to release it. So
That's a bummer.
that is a bummer, but it just means that I don't know if you're aware, but I'm a big proponent of open gaming. So it just means when I actually start, with the Majestic Fantasy Realm, not only I'll be able to make it and sell it, I'll be able to share it in a way that if something unfortunate ever happened to me, uh, other people who like it can continue it on for their own projects.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people are kind of leery of open gaming, but I find at the level that I sell at, a few hundred copies a year and stuff, what people want is the author's work. They want Rob Conley's work.
Right.
And everybody who came with me, who asked to use Black Marsh, and I followed up, looked at what they did like a year later, like a couple folks in Spain came out with their own OSR style rule set, and they wanted to use Black Marsh as their example setting, modified slightly because they have their own different world around it. And they asked me for permission. They didn't have to, but it was nice, and I said, "Sure, go ahead." And but the thing is, for in their community, it's very obvious that people go to them because they like them and their work, and they support them. So you know, it was money that I was never going to see in the first place, and it helped them. So everybody works out.
Yeah.
And if somebody happens to hear that and wanted to check my take out on it, that means I'll get a sale that I would not have before, and that can be a valuable thing, especially when you're only selling a couple hundred a year, then every customer counts.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it's got to be kind of flattering in a way to see people take like Black Marsh and build their own thing with it, that they were inspired by your work to do such a thing is got to be so cool.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I'll be lying if I said I kind of know what Black Marsh's secret sauce is, but also it just I marvel at that it is a secret sauce, that people like.
Yeah.
And all I can say is um, I have a friend named Tim Shorts of Gothic Manor, and those of you listening to him, Google him. He had a Patreon, and he had his own a way of doing things that really, really good stuff. Uh, he does mini adventures and designs. That's more of his wheelhouse. And but he is a master of terse writing. And then back in the 2000s, uh, he and I got together when the open game license first hit, and everybody started puzzling using the D20 SRD. We were thinking about how to get in that action ourselves, but we knew we need practice. So we kind of did little writing workshops among ourselves for a better part of the year. And Tim's mantra was like, less, cut it down, Rob, cut it down. And so I learned to say what I needed to say and only what I need to say. So when it comes to Black Marsh, where I got to pack a lot of stuff in a relatively short amount of space, it really helped me. And so I made sure that I made sure entries do one or two things. Either they not only describe what was in the locale, but with a sentence or two, kind of added to the whole, so that by the time you done reading it from front to finish, you will get the equivalent of that multi-page history blurb that so many traditionally formatted settings have. And but you didn't have to sit and read that first 10 pages of information drop. And then the second thing is, especially when it comes to people, is I make sure the history and the circumstances relate to the people in a way that brings them to life, that informs the reader of how they are to be role played. Because really, history and culture, they're all interesting stuff and more power if you like the right material on it. But when it comes to the table, the only part that matters is how it affects the role playing. Sure, puzzles and traps and interesting locations that you have to figure out, that's good, but the bulk of what really compelling about tabletop role playing, in my opinion, is role playing with the town merchant, with the with the noble that's in trouble, who has a daughter that's who's a bit of a bit sassy and has an attitude, and but the wife is just a sweet lady, and she's one really holding the household together. And from that, you can weave all kinds of interesting adventures and complications for adventures, that so that it's not just going to another warren of orcs. It's not just going to another cave full of ogres. There's a bit more heft to it.
I love it. So I kind of want to rewind, I guess, a little bit, because you said when you write, you say exactly what you need to, how you need to,
Hmm.
when you're done. And I'm kind of the same way, but I start out writing way more than I need and then trimming it down. Do you do the same thing, or is
I
your...
make way more notes than I need.
Yeah, I guess that's what I do is I'll write down a whole bunch of stuff and then build off of what I've got on the page.
Yeah, for example, I ran a campaign, a D&D 5e campaign in my Majestic Waterlands. I use a lot of different systems in my Waterlands over the years. GURPS, Fantasy Hero, D&D 5e, my own, Majestic Fantasy RPG. So this one, the players wanted an adventure in the Nap because they visited there, in one of the players visited there in a previous campaign. And basically, it's normally a good kingdom, but it's corrupt as all heck, which is very different from other good kingdoms that I play, well, that the players have ventured to in the setting. And the player was like, they could see everything, like the Church of Mitra with still the dominant church. The goddess in Mitra in my campaign, the goddess of honor and justice. And so she's still the dominant church in this realm, like in the other realms that they ventured to. But half the priests are corrupt, the nobles are corrupt, and it's all about, what can you do for me today? Yet they still pay lip service to her ideal. And so in the previous campaign, they only got a little taste because they had a by that time the party had acquired a sailing boat, and they were sailing around doing a bit of merchant trading. So they came there, did their business, and left. So for this campaign, when I asked the players what they wanted to play, and gave them, and one of the player piped out, "Hey Rob, any way we could adventure in the Nap? I really like what you did, but I didn't get enough time there, and I wanted to make a character that goes there." And he explained to the other players who haven't been there what it was about, and they go, "Yeah," and they kind of ignored the other possibilities and said, "Let's do that." And we did it, and it was a fun campaign. But as far as the prep for that campaign went, one of the things, because I like to do it. It's not required. I just like to do it. I like to make a king's list, or in this case, since the sovereign of Lanap is a prince, uh, um, I made a prince list of prince stemming back from the foundation of the kingdom, and it was a shorthand for way for me to organize my thoughts on how the history unfolded to where it got to the point today. And the essential point why it was kind of corrupt today is because, unlike the other realms that the players dealt with, the position of prince was only semi-hereditary. It was
Ah,
actually an elected position.
hmm,
So sometimes, a lot of the times, the son will follow the father, but some of the times, the council of nobles would elect a different prince, and there would be a civil war as a result, or there more commonly there would be a lot of horse trading. What can you do for me if I vote for you for a prince? Kind of like what happened with the Holy Roman Empire,
right.
and so that formed an important thread is why Lanap was Lanap, and then I just branched out from there, and uh, And I did give when asked, I will give the Prince list to the players, but the bulk of what I handed to player was this one sheet, two-sheet thing. One sheet with the general background and another sheet with the background specific to their characters.
Very cool.
I think we got a
Um,
question from Jose.
yeah, Jose said, can you tell us about some of the important factions in Black Marsh and some plot hooks?
Sure. So probably the central thing is that Blackmarsh, Castle Blackmarsh, is a remnant of their world's Roman Empire called the Bright Empire. And it was established because this Black Marsh, way back, millennia ago, there was this thing called the mountain that fell that came crashing into the ground and formed the Smoking Bay. And one of the things happened that when it impacted, it spewed asteroid, meteor, ejecti all over the place. But that was vid. A lot of it was in the form of vid, was magic in physical form. So once the tumult of the land settled down and things started growing again and animals and people could start moving again, they found the viz and they started fighting each other over it. And so when the Bright Empire was at the apex of its power, it heard of Black Marsh. So it built a road like the Romans do. They were called Ramos. Their culture was called Ramosians, and they built a road there and established Castle Blackmarsh. And when the empire fell after what they know called the Shattering, by big migrate, they had their own migration era. Then there was a big and barbarian invasion during that, and there was a big battle, and it was known as the Shattering because after that the empire was split, fell into its constituent parts, never to rise again. Um, Although there are some larger parts left over. And so Castle Blackmarsh was cut off and left to fend for itself. And because it was basically just a small town in the middle of essentially a wilderness, they kind of learned to get on along with their neighbors. But it also became a place where people from south could come and use it as a home base to explore Blackmarsh. And this meant it's had a magical community. And one of the guys in the magical community thought, I can take over and rule the entire land, get all this viz for myself. And his name was Actiel Oathbinder. And he tried to conquer Blackmarsh, but the elves of Greywood formed an alliance and they fought him, won, took him out. And this happened a few decades ago. And they were left with Castle Blackmarsh, so they occupied it. Basically, they didn't trust the humans remaining there not to have their own ideas of empire because Actio Oathbinder had followers, he had minions, and even though the core group dealt with, who knows where the next Caesar would come from, or the next Alexander, or even, God forbid, Genghis Khan. And so the elves have ruled Black Marsh ever since. And so one plot theme is that the humans are getting fed up with it. They felt they had more than paid the price for what Axial Oathbinder did. Two generations of people were born and raised, and the current generation feel they shouldn't, suffer for the sins of their father. So that is, even though the elves are good guys, and the human rebels are not necessarily bad guys, is a source of tension. And some of the other things that are going on is that the elves of Greywood, um, they're the center of a little culture of allied halflings and humans, the Black Marsh Ranger, and they have this organization called the Black Mark Ranger, which for millennia tries to keep peace in the region. They didn't exactly discourage exploration, but they were the spearhead that fought Axial Oathbinder. They would be the spearhead against anybody from the outside trying to conquer Black Marsh for their own end. But they believe in harmony and cooperation among all the races inhabiting Black Marsh. And they're dwarves that are part of that. And then you have a culture of humans that migrated from the north called the uh, Ostrobards, which I deliberately picked a name as a sort of a hybrid of the Lombards and the Ostrogoths of the migration period. And they're like a Dark Age, Anglo-Saxon, Dark Age type culture, and ruled by a duke, the Duke of Munchester. And they're not evil, and they're kind of good, but they got their own interests, and they're a young culture and looking to make their mark. And then off to the map to the south uh, was a realm dominated by Vikings, and the current up and coming empire, or what they call themselves the Grand Kingdom, but they're really an empire. They conquered the Vikings because the Vikings were raiding them. They got sick of it. They tracked them down to one of their homelands, and they conquered it. Well, several of them, and they were called the Vassian Vikings, the land of Vassa. So some of these Vassian Vikings fled northward into Black Marsh and carved out their own realm in exile, so that they're there. And then there are tribes of orcs. Uh, there are dark elves, which are not like drows, but they're definitely evil. And they believe that what the leadership of the elves of Greywood does is not enough to keep Black Marsh free of interloper. That they would have slaughtered everybody in Castle Black Marsh and leveled it to the ground, so it would never be a threat again. But so that's how hardcore they are. And so they're floating around doing what they're doing. And then you have like goblin tribes and people groups doing their thing. And you got a few of Axial Oathbinders minions floating around, weaker minions floating around, still looking for restore his empire, Oathbinder's empire.
Yeah, love the tapestry you have woven within this world. It is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, some of the other plot hooks, like there's sorry, sometimes it all runs together, so I have to look at my own stuff for reference. Yeah, the Dragonbone Peak, like, yeah, it's home of dragons, but it's also a network of caves under there that you can explore. The Black Marshes have ruins in them, and they're marshes. Even though these are only 5 mile hexes, trust me, we have swamps near where I live here, and they're kind of impressive, even though they're quite small. This one, 15 miles north to south, 40 miles east to west. And there's several of these here. And you have the White Mountains, the Pender Mountains. So there's a lot of things to explore and do in Black Marsh. And also put, as you can see from the map, there are plenty of X's in the ocean where you can go. And what's nice about what you can do in the Smoking Bay, because it was created by an asteroid impact, um, it's all crevasses and and abysses and stuff like that. And so it's not just like a smooth feed bed in there.
I cannot wait to explore this world. um, if you had some map making principles that you feel, do you have any that you feel are too often overlooked when people are making maps? Any, like, are there any like core principles that you have that you feel a lot of people leave off when they make maps? I guess would, I think I said that right, like
Yeah.
3 times.
Okay. You don't have to go overboard on ecology or the history of the people, but you should develop a sense of it. Like a good way to do it is to look at historical maps, look at the decade and just how things ebb and flow. And don't try to memorize the detail. Just look at the general pattern. How people like tend to congregate. Where do they tend to congregate? Coastlines, rivers, uh, and then they go to the hilly area uh, last, unless you're talking pre-Iron Age, and then they tend to go to the hilly areas first because the soils in the hilly areas are lighter and easier to work with the plows that they had back then. Really wasn't until they had steel, iron plows. Well, it wasn't. There were better quality iron, and they started using oxen and horses to plow with, that they were really able to clear out the river valleys and stuff. But just get a sense of that, and then just once you figured out the geography, just pencil in your set, pencil it in like that. And it doesn't have to be elaborate, but if you just add a touch of that, then your map will have what they call verisimilitude. It will feel like it's a natural place. And also it will actually, in a minor way, help with the role playing of NPC, because it will explain why the people are there, and that's just one more thread that you can add uh, to the role playing. Maybe if you want to go with Bronze Age, like my friend Joe, he ran a Bronze Age campaign. So in the Bronze Age, all your ne'er do wells and people who couldn't hack at farming and stuff, they would be kind of like in the river valleys, because that's, you couldn't do your farming there. You kind of do your farming there, but it was hard and not desirable. While everybody else occupied the areas of hilltop that were relatively level, not craggy hilltop, but the nice mounded with a
Yeah.
relatively flat top uh, hilltops. That would have been the desirable farmland for a Bronze Age civilization.
Uh, Joe in the chat asks, this time, Matt Jackson or Dyson logos?
Rob Conley, Joe. Remember, I do Mac commission, so I'm in there. I'm their competitor. Although I'm not much of a competitor given what those guys contributed to mapping.
Yeah, it is crazy what both of them have done. And yeah, like, I aspire to be like all of you. I wish I could. There's just so much that you can pull from every direction to fill up here with
Well, I
knowledge.
have some good news in that department. Matt Jackson and Dyson logos are actual artists. They can draw. Okay, even though they focus on mapping, they can actually draw. I can. I took drawing classes, but I am no artist. So when I do my maps, I'm more of a cartographer. Kind of can see it. This,
Yeah, I have a hard time doing the same thing. I'll be like,
yeah, we have to mirror, but
yeah.
this map right here is an exercise in cartography, in my view. Now, I, I won't sell myself short. I do have a sense of flair on how to make a map nice looking, but you know, what's I may be mispronouncing his name, but Mike Conley, who does all those maps for Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, if I do a map like that, it's because I went out and bought an art pack and I arranged the cutout uh on the map. I couldn't draw those trees and houses like Mike does or like Dyson does or Matt does. Although, you know, I do have learned a few tricks and I have several styles that I use. I have the I have this what I call my color style here, and then this map I've been showing, I have my black and white style here. Oh, and you would be interested to know if you go to my blog, Bat in the Attic .blogspot.com in the upper right corner, you will see there is a mapping kit, and I made a bunch of Inkscape compatible templates and symbols. These symbols that I use, I export them so they're compatible with Inkscape. So, and they're usable with other programs too. And so you won't have to start from scratch, Gabe. You can just download that. And
Yeah. I'm going to check that out.
drawing this style map is far easier.
Yeah. I'm with you, Joe. Joe said I can't draw a straight line with a ruler, and I have the artistic talent of my left toe. So,
Well, I'm not quite that bad, but yeah, I wish I can do better art myself. There's some things in my head, it's sometimes hard to communicate with other people, and I wish I can just render it myself, and it would be nice. Maybe
yeah.
someday.
So that was actually all I had for questions, my friend. I had a last one, but you kind of answered two questions with one thing. I was going to ask you if you could suggest three things to a newer cartographer to take their map making to the next level. What would it be? But I feel like you kind of answered that, or if you would like to
Well,
elaborate on that
I
more.
would get, you know, Hectographer or one of the mapping software and practice with that a bit. But keep in mind, you might be for your own home game, that probably all you ever need. But if you really want to take things to the next level, learn a vector illustration program, CorelDRAW, Adobe, um, or more likely Inkscape because it's free to download. Do donate them. It is all run by volunteers, but learn how to use those programs because those where you can do all the feature. And you can start off basic. You can take my hex crawl mapping kit and just place mountains where you want them and be done with it. And then later on, you can learn how to draw those mountains yourself or come up with your own scheme.
Yeah, I'll have to grab the kit because I've tried drawing mountains so many times and they come out so wonky looking. Joe
Yeah,
said,
Incarnate. Yeah. So Joe has
yep.
a good recommendation. Incarnate.
So where I'm done with questions, unless you've got to run, we can just kind of keep shooting the breeze.
Sure.
What?
So, okay, go on.
Oh, I was going to ask you how old you were when you first got it. Like, what really sparked you to have what I would call a love for cartography?
Well, I always liked maps. When I was 5, before I could read, I would have my mom read. My favorite books were like the Golden Book encyclopedias. I don't know if you ever ran into them, but
I think I had those as a kid. So,
yeah. So with all those illustrations, and you know, they were an encyclopedia, basic one, but still. And I love the maps because I got that they depicted. I got what they were, and so I could imagine other places, other lands. And then what fueled the role playing side of things was I read Lord of the Rings, loved it, and I loved the Lord of the Rings appendices because I loved reading history as a kid. Um, and I could read fast. I was always a speed reader with good comprehension. So, so I could read a lot. And but once you get done with the Lord of the Rings, you'll read it again, but not right away. But those appendices, you can just pour over them. So I would just go down. They were my brother's copy. He was really annoyed with me for borrowing them, but uh I would go down and specifically pick out the Return to Kings and sit down with the appendices, look at the map that was in book, fellowship. And then when D&D, I never really did anything with that. A doodle, but I mean, you draw a map, what are you going to do with it? Then D&D came along. Oh, then the light bulb came on my head. I can do I can make my maps, and there's a reason I can my maps will be useful because you D&D, you need maps. And so what I did was I took a piece of oat tag, which is, for those you don't know, is a poster-sized piece of cardboard that schools had. My mom was a school teacher, and she had a corner of her room with school supplies for home projects, and I could use some of it if I with permission. So I went there once I figured out what was up with D&D. I went there and grabbed a piece of oak tag and drew my first setting map. And it was, of course, horribly derivative. It had a Gondor, had a Rohan, had a Shire. But then I did something interesting. I took that map, I figured out the ratio of a letter-sized piece of paper. Because this was before computers and stuff. So I figured out how to shrink it. So I shrunk it because I discovered that my mom had graph paper with 1-inch squares. And they weren't irregularly cut. I mean, they lined up. They had a nice border and they lined up. I realized you can make sub maps with these. So I went to that map I just drew, this beautiful poster map I drew, and I cut it up with a pair of scissors into a series of roughly letter-sized shape. And then I form a deck with it, and I took a piece of paper and drew that in detailed. And there were like 24 of them, or 4 by 6. And I mapped out in that world, and I never used it, and then I lost it.
Ah,
The only thing I have left from that first map is a copy, because I wasn't stupid. So I got another piece of oak tag and made a copy of the overview map. And I still have that copy. I'm not going to drag it out. It's like stashed somewhere safe. It's about to fall apart, seriously. And I can't believe I lost it. And then, but I was doing the Waterlands then, and everybody was enjoying that. And the Waterlands made running campaigns so much easier than D&D because, or than Greyhawk, because Greyhawk had those 30-mile hexes and they didn't tell you squat. I mean, it was great. I loved it, but there was no local level detail. It's just, travelogue stuff. And with the Waterlands, um, they had the hex grid, they had it numbered, and they had 18 of these poster-sized maps, 18 inches high, 24 inches wide, and they had a booklet that come with each of these maps that told you what villages was in there, what lairs, ruins, and islands. And they're all like 1 or 2 liners, which was okay. That's all I needed. I could pick it up from there. And there was like dozens of these. So you could see like, okay, there's some pumas here, some manticores here, some orcs here, a village of halfling, a village of goblins. Now what can I make for this area? And so after I ran that, I thought, oh, you know what? Okay, so I lost my old map, but I'm going to make a new one. So I did. Well, I made something like this, and then I sat down And by this time, they were publishing, like, really good hex paper,
Yep.
so I didn't have to rely on, scrap paper, so I made these. Of course, what happened? I lost it.
Ugh.
This is not even the original. This is like the second version. And then I made this, and well, this is the only one I left off that I had left, and this is why I chose the Isle of Paid as or Pile in the blog post, but in the well, I talked it with Joe and a bunch of other folks, and nobody can figure out how to pronounce it, so we changed it to a name. Still starts with the letter P, but it's easier to pronounce. So the Island of Paid, and so this is why I picked it, because this is the one map out of there, and you can see the little pencil marks where I
Yep.
drew in the 3 mile hexes that I use. And and it was neat doing that. But yeah, so yeah, here's another map I lost. So I decided one day, just on a lark, you know what? I'm gonna I did all this work transferring my Waterlands map into a color maps I drew myself with color and all that, and drew in the hard style. Well, I'm gonna do that to the first fantasy campaign map for Blackmore. Unfortunately, I lost that too. This is the only survivor I have left.
I love it.
The big innovation of this map was my dad got a labeler.
Oh,
So I had
yeah.
to buy my own roll, but I used that and I made my own labels after I was done with it.
That's great.
And I took a photocopy of this, stashed it in one of my keepsake folders, then I lost the map.
Ugh.
So, but for every map I lost, there's still I kept.
I love when I'll stumble across, wow, look at that.
Yeah. So
Holy
this is
smokes.
yeah, the island of Paid is like right there.
Wow.
And then well it gets better. So I have that. And all these maps are scanned in, by the way, so it's gonna have to take a double hit before I lose these maps. And then of course I drew it in the style I did the Waterlands.
Wow.
It's slightly zoomed in. And again, the island of Paid is right about there.
That is crazy. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've gotta step up my map making game here. So, and then we'll
No,
have
I
to get
drew
back
this.
together in a while and I can show you what I've done. 1988. Wow.
Yep.
I'll tell you though, nothing is more satisfying than finding an old box and being like, oh, I wonder what's in here, and cracking it open and finding an old project in there.
Oh yeah, I have folders of stuff. And sometimes I forget what I have in the folders and I pull it out. Just, oh, that's where it is. And it's always nice to find your old things like that.
Yeah, one box that I found a couple years ago that I thought I had lost in a move was a bunch of my brother's old gaming stuff from back in the 80s, like old characters and just random tables he had made up. And one was of a system I had never heard of. It was called Earth.
Earth.
EARTHE, I believe. I don't think I have anything right handy that I can grab.
Earth. Oh, you know what? I think that's Gygax, Dangerous Journeys.
Okay. And he played a badger in that game. And I was just like, that is so cool. And I took some of his old character sheets where they'll never, and like laminated them so that they'll never, that I've got
Oh,
them
that's a good
forever.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
my oldest character sheet is from 1979.
that's awesome.
Yeah, the paper's getting pretty thin. I probably should think about laminating it.
Yep, laminators are is one of my favorite friends for
Oh
preserving
yeah,
stuff
you
that
can
I have.
see all these things are laminated. Yeah, I guess I'll show you this. So remember I told you about drawing the basics and then making a big photocopy of them?
Yep.
Well, this is an unfinished project for the city of Bertistan. Uh, but so at this point, I would take this and get a blueprint, then get a photocopy of this mate, and that's what I would color in ink. And I would keep this pristine in case it got ruined or I made a mistake. I'll just run off another fit. It's still a lot of work to recreate, obviously, but a lot less work if I have this floating around.
Right. Yeah, it's
So,
great.
and
You've got like a template that you can just continuously recreate, and it's so cool. Um, so you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to come back to it. I took a note here. Hardmaster. I have never heard of that game.
you never heard of it.
No. So you'll
Okay.
have to bring
Well,
me up to speed, because I know in your
well,
blog you
just
said it
be
was your
warning.
favorite game.
I'm a bit obligated to Columbia Games. They gave me a shout out uh in their recent newsletter, which I really appreciate because frankly, I'm just a good customer, you know. I've been a long time, and I did a lot of promotion of that in the blog, but all right, let's see if I can get that. There we go. Forgive me, audience. You're not supposed to do this on a live stream, but
They can blame it on me. I'm the one that asked.
yeah. Well, I can't really show it on camera, but I've been collecting Harn stuff for so long that I'll just grab one of these, and that way you can understand the rabbit hole that you'll get into if you want to go all things Harn. You don't have to go down the rabbit hole, but it's just the quality of their material and everything that they do. It's outstanding. So it begins with this Harn World. This is their most recent version. They just had a Kickstarter for this, and it's a pretty thick book. Uh, However, it's divided into a couple articles that explain Harn itself, and then it has a nice little mini encyclopedia style thing called the Harn Dex.
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
what Harn is, it is an island the size of Madagascar. See where they put the yeah, right there. Oh wow, the green got the right shade of green.
Nice.
So that is Harn.
Okay. That is a
Okay.
beautiful map.
So there are several distinct kingdoms. There's like kingdom here, there's a kingdom there, there's a Viking realm up there, there are elves right here, dwarves right here. There is a merchant republic, kind of like the ones that were in medieval Italy.
Yep.
And there's a good kingdom there. They don't have alignments, but it's definitely a good kingdom, but there's an evil kingdom here. Let's just say the religion these guys worship, is unpleasant, while the good kingdom. So a lot of people would be happy with just this. Now I got to warn you, it is pricey, but they put the quality in it, and the writing is top notch.
Well, you can see it
So
even looking
you
at
get what you
those.
paid for. What?
You can see it just looking at the pages that they used a really thick stock on those pages.
Yeah, they really upped their game on presentation. Like back in the day, all the illustrations would have been like this black and white drawing, but over the years they have slowly changed it to color. And that's the thing. They've been continuing. Now, here's the neat thing about it and why there's so much material back there. Since Harn was released in the mid 80s, they have been continuously publishing for it. Some years, there were some fallow years where they didn't do a whole lot, but they have never broken compatibility.
Wow.
They always kept the same time, which is the year 720. So anything you bought in, say, like 87 would be compatible with what you would buy today.
Wow.
What you
Nobody
buy
does that.
today, the difference between today and back then, they were a lot more bare bones. They would describe a city in say 10 pages. Nowadays, they would describe a city in about 40 to 50 pages.
Phew.
But the bulk of the expansion is in the characters. Before they would just say, so and so lived here, this is what they're about, this is the quality good, and maybe a sentence or two about anything of special of note. But now they give you a paragraph, a short, still a tersely written short paragraph that gives you a sense of how to role play the guy and what connections you have, and more adventure scenes basically.
Right.
So, and it was the right way of expanding it, but they didn't go overboard. They said this is how far we're going to expand it, and they've been consistent with that.
That's amazing.
Now, this is Harn Master. Harn is systemless, okay? Even though it has a distinct pantheon and stuff like that. Harn Master is a role-playing game. It is a D100 system, and sorry, Jose, I'm going to disagree. It can be complex, but actually, what Harn Master is an example of an RPG that's front-loaded. Once you get to character generation, fill out your character sheet, in actual play, it plays relatively quickly. So, but the character generation is moderately complex. Okay, think RuneQuest. Actually not RuneQuest, but basic role playing from Chaosium.
Yep.
Or Mithras, that's a good example. Mithras probably, character generation is probably about it. It's a little bit more complex, but not much more as Harn Master. But where Harn Master really shines is once you get the character sheet uh, filled out. Let's see if I have. Good. It goes relatively quickly. And the reason why it goes relatively quickly, that even though people look at this and say, oh my Lord, this is really all you need. You're not continually flipping through the rule book.
Oh, that's great.
So, and the nice thing about Harn Master is the combat system is basically you get to basically get to do an action. You can do a move, you can engage, you can charge. Some of these actions are like half move, and like an engage, you get to do half your move, and a free move, you get to do your entire move. And but the neat thing about combat is when you get a defense, so if you're defending, you get to pick a defense, so you have a chance to block in a blow. Second, it doesn't use hit points.
Hmm.
Now, it might
Interesting.
sound tedious that you have to write down each injury, but it's just really a short note. But basically what happens is when you get hit, two things happen. You suffer an injury, which reduces your skill. So if you suffer a level 3 injury because you were hit in the upper arm with a maul, somebody swing a maul and hit you in upper arm with a huge impact, then you would be minus a level 3 injury, just multiplied by 5. You're minus 15 to whatever you're hit. And when you get hit, you have to make a saving throw. Saving throw means you could pass out, the blow is big enough, you could die, or you could fumble, you can stumble, fall down to the ground. And the other, so that's why they didn't just give you in the percentages, because your level 3 injury means now you got to roll low for your save. So with a level 3 injury on your sheet, you're now +3 to your saving throws. So the more injured you get, the harder it is to make these saving throws. And eventually you'll get like a light tap on the shoulder, but you're so injured, you just pass out.
Oh, geez.
And it's the
Actually, that
only,
sounds kind of fun without the hit point. That doesn't sound too tedious to me. That sounds kind of fun.
yes. And the 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 thing is that oh, almost lost my train of thought here. Um, you tap. Oh, you know what? I forgot.
Sorry
But
about that.
no, that's all right. Um, but the combat plays relatively quickly, as long as you have that chart. And that chart's free to download, so you can download it and make as many copies as you want for everybody in the table. The big problem with character generation is calculating what they call the skill base, is where your skill starts out at, and that involves averaging 3 attributes together. So
Hmm,
what I recommend to handle that is make a table of 9 through the math on that 54. That way you just add the attribute, look up on the table, oh, that's the skill base.
gotcha.
And it will make it so much quicker, because back in the day, we just punched up in the calculator, and it took a little time. Um, so, but if you're not into Harm Master, and I gotta admit, it is pricey. The base Harm Master doesn't have a magic system. It doesn't have a religious system, even though it talks about the deities and stuff like that. Um, There's a Harm Master Magic and a Harm Master Religion for those things, and the best bestiary too. So if A and D is your forte, I recommend running a very early version of OD&D, or either BX or OD&D itself, because those two editions are very much more grounded in uh, medieval feel than later editions. If you're a 10th level OD&D fighter and you fight it facing a mob of peasants, they can still take you out.
Yeah.
Um, but it'll work with Mithras, RuneQuest, GURPS, whatever system that you find your favorite. But the reason I say that Harn is a rabbit hole, because so you have your Harn book, that's what you start out. You see this, they come out with articles. Like, these are all the articles I have on the Kingdom of Kanday, which is just one of the realms of Harn. So here,
Wow, look at all those.
yeah. So here I have a 52-page article on the Kingdom of Kanday. And then usually all the kingdoms have one major cities. So this city, that is a 18-page article.
Wow.
But they thoroughly cover everything. And, as you can see, that they're all one paragraph entry. Even the opening is relatively short, just a page or two. And they have like a really handy index. And but then, they were like, this is about a castle named Dirissa.
Man, I love that level of detail.
And they just keep coming out with more and more. And, they just, you buy it a little at a time. This is an older article, so it's black and white. This was made in the about around 2020, in the mid 2000s, I think. Yeah, 2002.
Well, I'm gonna have to
So
check this out because I'm liking what you're showing me.
yeah, yeah, and if you're starting out, get the Harn World and then, pick a kingdom and just focus on that for a while. 'Cause, if you go they always have an all-in option where you can get everything they ever released in one fell swoop, and it's above $500 at this point,
Wow.
but the advantage of that is you get all their PDFs in one fell swoop.
That would be like trying to drink from a fire hydrant, trying to
Yeah,
take
it
all
it
that in
it
at
it would.
once.
Now make sure you're really gonna use it. Now what I use it for, I have run Harn campaigns before, but mostly what I'll use it for is say, "Okay, the players went east instead of west. They're going to this castle. I have nothing detailed. So, kind of looks like it's a castle by a river. So I'll pull out my Harn.
And a castle by the river.
Yeah, castle by the river. I'll read up on it. I'll say, okay, that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit. I'll make a page of notes that will adapt it. But even though I'm adapting it, I'll still have the fallen falcon in there, Cortesians, Cortesian place, the palace of the Azure Robe that the players want to have a good time for the night, and so forth and so on. So I'll still have all that, but the background would fit my campaign. And the nice thing about Harn that allows that is Harn is very, very low fantasy medieval. And of course, what is D&D? It
High
is
high
it, it,
fantasy.
it it's high fantasy, but it's also still medieval.
Right.
It's got your kings, you got your dukes, you got your barons, you got your knights. So you still have that medieval expectation, although it isn't hardcore medieval like Harn World or like Pendragon or Chivalry and Sorcery. But what it means is when you have something like Harn World or another game I like called Ars Magica, they write stuff on the medieval life. It's very easy to adapt to a D&D campaign.
I'm gonna have to check them all out. I am a collector. Like I love collecting books. Like I had a I started out with the AD&D. Oh, I can see the cover. I just lost the name. The Dungeoneers.
Survival Guide,
Yes, that. Oh, I just lost his name. Duh,
Wilderness
was it?
Survival Guide, the late era AD&D 1E era.
Yep. And that was one of the first books I got that unfortunately is another one of those things that got lost that I'm going to have to reorder one of these days just for nostalgia's sake.
I still have my copy.
Nice.
I do not have my original 3 books. I gave them away when they came out with the new covers. Should not have done that. But I still have the original covers. That whole thing I was talked about earlier about I guess that was during the pre-show, we were talking, about the stuff we had, and I have a bunch of, box sets up there, and I am not a collector, even though I have a lot of role-playing stuff, because I've never had anything really never had a lot thrown out, because obviously I had some things I bought. But, when I learned about eBay and stuff, I resolved to collect all the stuff I had back in the day, and then I stopped. And, so when it came to, I found a copy of the original covers for AD&D 1E, and I made sure I got Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, and the DM's Guide. And
Nice.
I still have my new cover, version. Those are original.
Yeah, I'm going to have to make a list of everything that got lost over the years and do what you've done and just get the stuff that was important to my brother and I and just to have it.
Yeah,
So, you know,
yeah, if you got
and
the room for it, I recommend it. It's nice.
yep. Excuse me. Well, Robert, I should probably let you go.
Okay.
I have had an absolute blast talking with you. I hope you have as well.
Yep.
Um, I definitely want to have you back on. I've already forgotten the name of your next Kickstarter, but I'd love to have you on for it.
Into the majestic fantasy
Into the
realm.
Majestic Fantasy Realm. All right. I am going to remember that, and I will be there day one to back it. So,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
my pleasure. But you have a wonderful night. And Joe and Jose, thank you so much for joining us this evening and asking questions and pushing him to talk about the fine editing. And we will see you folks next time. Have a good night.